this morning's focus is on tourism. We'll be talking about the way things are and the issues that are to be teased out as we get ready and try and get some of the tourist season back up and running from right now and on to July, August and September. With me in the line to talk about this is Eoghan Corry, who's a travel writer and is also on the Tourism Recovery Task Force. We've Minister for State for Tourism and Deputy for this county, Brendan Griffin, with us on the line, and Bernadette Randles of the Irish Hotels Federation in Kerry. She's National Vice Chair of that organisation as well as Pat O'Leary, formerly of Leapur, but also on the Tourism Recovery Task Force with us. Good morning to all of you, and thanks for talking to us on the programme this morning. I'm going to start with the season, and I'll start with you, Eoghan Corry. There is this international dimension as well to this in terms of tourism and what countries are opening when, and if we will get any outside tourists coming into this country, be it in well, maybe not July, but August, September, perhaps October. What's your view? And I know it's a changing situation and a very fluid situation. What's your view on what's left for Irish hospitality businesses in this summer?
It's hard to tell, but the enemies of tourism in any season, good or bad, are uncertainty. What we've seen is a lot of confusion, some of which is beginning to clear in a very, very small way in the last week. One of the reasons is Margherita Skinas of the European Commission drew up a plan about 3 weeks ago to try and unlock the borders. And there is a sort of a convergence of European countries unlocking their borders, putting the drawbridge back down. As all the listeners would know, it's easy to pull up a drawbridge. It's much more difficult to decide when to put it back down. But June the 15th is the key date for most European countries, some of them earlier, but none of them later. And June the 15th is a big date. A second big date for us is July the 1st. This was started by our own Michael O'Leary when he said he was going to return 40% of his fleet to the sky on July the 1st, 1,000 flights a day. Obviously, Ireland is a small part of his business. He's right across Europe. But that boldness of that decision, it influenced some of the countries in their decisions to reopen tourism industries. And it also influenced the other airlines. Some of them are following in that week of July. We'll see some of our transatlantic services returning and some of the eastbound services also coming back that week. And in fact, on Friday, 2 of the airlines brought forward their date. So what we've seen in the last few days, Jerry, is that a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty, and that's begun to lift at a European level and at an international level. And on Friday, the Irish government moved forward slightly with the unlocking. So even if we were talking about this day last week, things would look a lot gloomier. But let's be absolutely clear about this. There's not much of the season left to fight for, and it's also going to be very heavily dependent on domestic, because the international booking season has passed. There may be a little bit of excitement, particularly if Ryanair put very, very good fares into the market for flights to Ireland. Michael O'Leary, I was talking to him last week, he said that we could get a lot of British into Ireland, but obviously there's a big deterrent on that, and that's the 14-day quarantine rule, which is up for review, and I think it's on June the 18th.
Okay, so that's is it up for review on June the 18th, or does it come to an end on June the 18th?
On the 18th, the Irish government will be deciding whether to renew it or not. There's a lot of ire about the 14-day quarantine period, both at European Commission level, at aviation level, but thankfully it's all been directed at the British, who have a much higher profile. They're only introducing theirs at the moment, and we had a reciprocal ban by France, a tit-for-tat thing where British coming into France would have to quarantine for 14 days. Ours is still rumbling along there, but it's not really noticed on an international scale, and it seems to be because of the doubtful legality of it. The legals on it are that it's illegal not to fill out the locator form, but it's not illegal to breach the quarantine. So I would be surprised if it's allowed to trundle on in its current form, that it's not brought an end to at some stage under government cabinet decision. But it's that's for the people within cabinet to decide, and I think the pressure is on them to say there are better ways of policing your coronavirus risk.
Okay, stay with us on. Bernadette Randles of the IHF. Can I talk to you about how you were feeling about maybe July, August and September, particularly I suppose August and September. I'm hearing anecdotally on the ground here, a lot of holiday homes in popular spots in Kerry are booked out. Now that would all be effectively, a lot of it anyway, would be from the domestic market, I would imagine. But what are your members telling you about what bookings are like at the moment for that end of the summer, shall we call it?
Okay, good morning, Jerry. Thank you very much. I suppose the first excellent news we got was a welcome boost for the tourism community in Kerry for people of all ages across the country who are looking forward to a well-deserved holiday lockdown. So therefore, you've two kind of positives there. One for the employees who will get back to work in the businesses, and two for the for the people in the county or beyond the county who will be able to travel on holiday in Kerry. Kerry has so much to offer. But, and this is the bus, I suppose you have two things. All of Ireland has so much to offer. How much will people actually travel? The hotels will create a safe hotel to come on holiday in, and then Kerry has so much to offer people. But we're then with our challenges of getting opening safely. So we have a good few positives which we welcome, and then we've to try and balance off the difficulties that may restrain us from opening one of our businesses.
And that element of it, that decision is being made by everyone now. There's the frenetic preparations on the one hand in trying to get ready to open, trying to be able to social distance, trying to train your staff, trying to mark out your restaurants, your dining areas, the different way people will experience the hotels. And on the other hand, then I suppose you're trying to get your pricing right and trying to attract enough business to make it all viable, Bernadette. It's kind of a leap into an unknown.
It is a leap into the unknown, because one, you don't know how many bookings you're going to get, so you're going to make all these preparations. But if you've only got 2 rooms staying, then it's very hard to be viable. But look, I'm going to remain positive. Kerry has an awful lot to offer, as I say, people within the county and outside the county. Not everybody's going to open, Jerry. It's very difficult. While you have positive news, as I said, on one hand, you have the challenges and the difficulties of opening. You need working capital. You need breaks on paying things like rates. And like the wage subsidy, they have extended it, which is absolutely great news again for the tourists. But it's not just for us, the business owner, it's for the employees. It gives us an opportunity to get people back into work so they're not at home. People talk about mindfulness the whole time. We're continually asking people, not just the hotels, the whole country is continually asking people to do this, to do that, to continuously do things. So now we need to, maybe give them back a bit, or what's the word I'm looking for? Those that work very hard on the front line, maybe they need the holidays. Maybe the people that are home all the time needs the holidays.
Yeah.
Maybe the people at home all the time need to get back into work. So I think if we can get up and running safely, we can do positivity for everybody.
Okay, that's a key point. And Brendan Griffin, if I could bring you in on that, Minister Brendan Griffin, about that, and it's in the papers this morning. It's discussed over the weekend. This whole idea of 2 meters versus 1 meters. And the effect that has on viability. Now, it's not an easy decision to come to. Public health, again, always has to be at the forefront. And we are getting some reports out of the UK and elsewhere that the incidence of the virus are again on the rise. So that has to be borne in mind. But when it comes to being able to reopen an economy, that decision, it cuts through everything in terms of its importance.
Yeah, good morning, Jerry, and good morning to Pat, Bernadette and Eoghan and to everybody listening. It's a very delicate balancing act, Jerry, between saving lives and saving livelihoods, and the government's job, I suppose, is to try to strike that balance and to get it right. And if you don't get it right, it costs lives, and and if you go too far in the other direction, it costs jobs and economic activity. So it is not easy, and that is, I suppose, this week that's going to be one of the big focuses now, is the 2 metre versus 1 metre issue. And I know that research that we have within our department shows that the number of people returning to work, if it's decided to go with 1 metre, would be substantially more than what it would be with 2 metres. And we know that many businesses just wouldn't find it viable to reopen at 2 metres. So this is the big question. This is under discussion. Our department is liaising with colleagues in the Department of Health and the Department of Taoiseach about this and working hard on it to try to resolve it, as well as working very, very closely with industry partners as well. And there has been a great cooperation on that front. But again, look, we are going in the right direction, I suppose, in terms of overall numbers. This is primarily a public health issue. we are seeing over the last couple of weeks encouraging figures. Every single death is one too many, and every single new case is one too many. But we've gone from a situation where in some cases, we had many, many deaths in one day down now to single figures, thankfully. And similarly, from hundreds of new cases down to, I think yesterday was 25. But again, we have to closely monitor that, and we know that activity in the community doesn't manifest itself in terms of new cases for quite a significant time. It could be up to 2 weeks afterwards. So we have to look at it closely, but I certainly feel we're in a far better place today than we were 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I do feel as well that the announcements from last Friday, which many, many of us worked really hard to achieve, and it was a great cooperative effort between government and industry and everybody who put their shoulders to the wheel. That's given a massive shot in the arm, I think, to everyone in the industry. It has been a very positive development. But again, I would consider it akin to a fighter getting off the ropes. They have to start landing punches now, but they have a fighting chance now. And that's the way I would see it. There's an awful lot to be done yet. But Friday's announcement was crucial in terms of giving some hope to the industry and giving a chance for some form of recovery for 2020. But it will still go down as an awful year, as a terrible year. I mean, there is no question about it. The ground that has been lost already and the huge challenges that will exist in terms of particularly the international market will ensure that this year will be a really bad year for tourism, but we're into damage limitation territory and to try to salvage something from the second half of the year. And we have some chance now compared to where we were a few weeks ago. So my focus is to continue to work with people across all parts of the industry to try to optimise the opportunities that are there, the potential that's there for the second half of the year, to try to get as many supports as possible for the industry and to try to make the most of what is there at the moment and to try to overcome the challenges. There's an awful lot of work to be done.
And there's a key issue there about the supports that may or may not be in place and a new government putting them in place in a timely manner. We'll talk more about that. We're going to talk with Pat O'Leary as well, and also Eoghan and Bernadette. If you have a view, if you have any ideas, any suggestions of what the government should be doing to support the businesses right now who are deciding whether they will open up again or not, if you're in that boat and you're concerned, what do you think needs to be done to rebuild Kerry and get Kerry going again? We want to hear from you. We'll have more with our panel after we take these.
Rebuilding Kerry on Kerry Today. Rebuilding Kerry on Kerry Today.
Yeah, we're talking with Eoghan Corry of Travel Extra. We've Pat O'Leary, who's chair of the Kerry Tourism Industry Federation. We've Minister for State Brendan Griffin, and also Bernadette Randles of the IHF with us on the line to talk about the job of, I suppose, getting tourism back on track once places do reopen. And Pat O'Leary, if we could talk to you first of all about the Tourism Industry Federation. I know you remember the Tourism Recovery Task Force too, but what have businesses been saying to you, and what concerns they've been expressing about the difficult decision, difficult challenges they're facing, and wondering if they'll be viable when they reopen?
Good morning, Jerry. Yes, that is really the question. I think as the Kerry Tourism Federation, we represent all tourism interests. So from large groups like Burnley's Hotel Federation, Chambers of Commerce, down to the small one-person operation. So it's the full spectrum of tourism in Kerry. Clearly, the message is the same everywhere, regardless of the size or scale. The loss in revenue is clear. I think the survey, which most people have seen at this stage, which showed a net loss in revenue to Kerry of €500 million, speaks for itself. So one can imagine that all industries are suffering. We had two phases laid out in our plan. One was the survival phase and then the recovery phase. I think we're still just coming to the end of the survival phase. Various measures were put in place by government, which certainly were appreciated. But now we're looking, again, the announcement last Friday by government was very much appreciated. We're now looking at a possible recovery phase, albeit limited recovery, as the season is considerably shorter than we normally would have had.
So it continues, I suppose, to be an extent about survival for the rest of this year and trying to get some money in to keep things going to look to 2021 perhaps.
Very much so, and as you said earlier, one of the other participants said it's mainly domestic tourism will be the focus for the year going forward. And this is why it's critical that we have, let's say, firstly, local tourism, in that the people of Kerry support the tourist industry in Kerry, and then obviously national tourism thereafter.
Okay, and Pat, do you see, I suppose, it'll be a wait and see to an extent, but do you see, I suppose, it being a learning thing for businesses and for hotels and pubs and restaurants as we go forward into July and August and September, that some businesses will learn, yes, this is how we do it in this new way, this is how we organise ourselves, particularly for next season, or other businesses, unfortunately, would say, well, we aren't going to survive this, we need to adapt and change, or we just can't keep going.
That is true, and some businesses already have been very, very proactive in the learning process, especially with the support of Kerry County Council with the training programmes for the tourist industry. So certainly some businesses have already taken action. You're right, other businesses, depending on the nature of the business, will find it more difficult. Possibly looking overseas is a good way to go. Quite a lot of our European neighbours have already
open, yeah,
and they're working, successfully. Some better than others, but the feedback is positive. So I think there's a template there that's being monitored, and they can be used and applied also in the Kerry area.
Okay, all right. Eoghan Corry, can I ask you just on that question of watching places like Spain and Italy, countries similar to Ireland that are hugely dependent on tourism for their national GDP. We'll have to pay close attention to that. And also, the airlines, are they going to need help into next year? Look, they're big corporations, but at the same time, we're going to depend on them to fly tourists into us.
You've hit the nail on the head there, Jerry. All the tourism product is worth nothing unless we have the air access. There's two or three things that are very much in our favour coming out of this. One of them is our airlines. Almost every European country, Italy, you instance there, has an airline which is effectively bankrupt and has just got a bailout of 500 million from the government, Alitalia. It's struggling. Every single, or even Germany, Lufthansa have gone in looking for aid. One of the three things, really strong things in our favour, is that our air access is not in question. Not only have we two strong cash-rich airlines in Ryanair and Aer Lingus through the AIG group, but they also are very feisty and they're very pro getting back in the sky early. Michael O'Leary is talking about opportunities. He wants to fly, his flight numbers would be down to 80 million in the next year. But he says in 2021, he'll carry more than he did in 2019. Almost every other airline is talking about 5 years later, 4 years later than that, before things return to normal. That's maybe a little bit of bravado, but it means that he's up for the fight, to use Brendan's analogy of the boxer. He's a man who doesn't stay on the ropes very long. So that's in our favour. We're going to have the access. And the second thing, one really important thing in our favour, and Kerry's at the core of this, what is tourism going to look like when this passes or regresses? And it's certainly not going to be big stadium stuff, queuing for 40 minutes to see Pirates of the Caribbean, cruise ships with 5,400 passengers. It's going to be a lot of outdoor, a lot of social distancing. It doesn't matter if it's 1 metre or 2 metre if you've got the Atlantic wind blowing in your hair. Yeah. So that's where Ireland as a whole, the Wild Atlantic Way, and Kerry in particular, could be right there at the heart of the action. The third thing, and we sometimes take it for granted that we have it, and you have it, and you guys have it in spades in Kerry, is that Irish people get it about tourism. The politicians get it at national level and at local level, but everybody gets it. The teenager who's on the road who's asked for directions by a tourist respects the tourist and is delighted to have him there. There are three really strong cards we have to play when we get back in the business. And I would instance you're saying about the other European countries. Portugal has a low rate, much lower, 1/3 the death rate we have here, and it stayed open through the crisis and has introduced a couple of interesting ideas like certifying premises so that people will be more willing to go there. Spain has come from a standing start, from a very low ranking in the sort of COVID charts, to having a very proactive campaign to restore their tourism. We're watching all these other markets moving fast, and this is where we have to be not stuck in the starting blocks. This is where we have to be pumping out those selling points that we have and playing for everything we've got in a very, very difficult market. There'll be a diminished tourist market. There's going to be nervousness for months, maybe even a year or two to come. And we've got to play for our market share. And it does it does bring you to think of what do we have that, like our competitors, particularly in the neighbouring Ireland, which has a terrible rate, what do we have that the others do not? One of them is that tremendous air access question, 2 strong airlines, and the big American airlines who are looking for places to put their aircraft. They want to fill those aircraft, get them back in the sky quickly. It's a very short flight to Ireland compared with Eastern Europe, and they're looking at markets which have a better appeal to the American consumer in the new post-COVID world. Places that have a nice green branding, places that have high cliffs with the Atlantic crashing against them, and an outdoor image. They're all the advantages that Kerry and Ireland have.
We need to be promoting that and getting that message out there. Okay, stay with us for 2 or 3 more minutes. We're going to talk a bit more about supports that are available that will perhaps maybe need to be available, amongst other things. We'll get back to our panel on rebuilding Kerry after we take these.
Rebuilding Kerry on Kerry Today.
Yeah, we're talking with Eoghan Corry of Travel Extra, also in the Tourism Recovery Task Force. We've got Minister for State Brendan Griffin on the line, Bernadette Randles of the Irish Hotels Federation in Kerry, and hotelier here in Killarney, of course, and Pat O'Leary, who is the chair of the Kerry Tourism Industry Federation. We're talking about rebuilding Kerry and putting focus on tourism this morning. If you've comments and views, get them into us. And we've one comment here. I'll put this to you, Minister Brendan Griffin. Caller says the EU announced the €750 billion grant aid packages for business affected by COVID-19. He says we haven't heard a whisper of that here in Ireland. What has Minister Griffin got to say about this? I posed this earlier myself, this historic agreement between the EU members, but particularly Germany and France, and particularly unusual for the German Ministry for Finance to be so free spending. That underlines the gravity of the situation. How is that going to percolate through and feed down to us, Brendan Griffin?
Yeah, it's very positive. I mean, we'd be in a very different position, I think, if we were talking about Europe not providing the types of supports that are needed. So what the Irish government will be doing and is already working on is trying to get as much of that pie as possible and to try to ensure that that money gets into the economy, into the front line where it's needed to stimulate activity. And I think that is the appropriate response that I think, Jerry, I've been on here with you, and that would be my political philosophy, certainly, that at a time like this you need to pump money in to get things moving again, because I think the fundamentals in the Irish economy and more or less throughout Europe are pretty decent at the moment, considering where we were 10 years ago, for example. So that's positive, and it's a case of getting that money in now. And again, I think it's important that, you know, we're at this particular point at the moment now where a government is programme for government formation talks are taking place, and I think there's a great opportunity for the next government to be the most pro-tourism government in the history of the state, to really embrace this challenge now and to turn it into an opportunity, and particularly to address many of the issues that Eoghan was referring to there, the need for new products, new experiences, particularly embracing the great outdoors.
Yeah.
And there is no better country in the world positioned to capitalise on that than Ireland.
So in order to do that, the businesses, though, will have to survive. So is this going to be, and I'm conscious it's only just been announced, but is this going to be helicopter money? It's grants, not loans, I take it. So when will businesses who right now are making those key decisions get some sight of what's being proposed? Well,
what I'm working on with officials in my department, and I'm conscious that this is happening throughout government, is to try to get that money in as quickly as possible to generate as much economic activity as possible, as quickly as possible as well. And again, this is about ensuring survival in this phase so that we can thrive into the future. And I want to see the businesses that are viable under normal circumstances getting their fair chance to survive throughout this, which is an extraordinary situation. But, you know, I think when we look at Kerry, though, and we look at the opportunities we have, we've already made great progress in relation to greenways, and that's something that has started before this, and now we see that they're now even more important. But also, we have the Wild Atlantic Way here. It was an initiative of the government that I was part of back in 2011, and that's something now I think that we need to build on. And there's great potential to convert that experience into a continuous walkway, as well as being an experience, a route experience. And that's something I think that has massive potential into the future, and that's something I'm really pushing hard at the moment as well.
Okay,
really
do you
give
think,
Kerry a massive
there's been calls, I'll go to
future.
Bernadette in a moment about what specifically her sector would want, but the 9% VAT rate has been talked about and demanded again. Is that something you're looking at? And again, I'm conscious there's a government being formed, so it may not be your decision, or it may not be a decision of the government that we currently have, the acting government.
Right now, I feel that 9% would even be too high because businesses are so hard pressed at the moment. I feel that 9% would be inappropriate even. We need to go to the lowest possible rate for this particular phase. Perhaps in the future there is scope to return to 9%, but certainly my view would be that the government right now needs to do as much as it can in terms of eliminating causing any costs to business that are undue. So my understanding from the legalities of this is that the 5% rate could be introduced more or less overnight by Dáil Éireann. A 0% rate would need EC approval, European Commission approval, and that may take some time. So right now, my feeling on this is that the government needs to be as positive as possible to business and to give the best possible environments for business to survive. We're not talking about people profiteering here. We're talking about basic survival, and that's certainly what I'd be fighting for around the table.
Okay, Bernadette Randles, do you welcome those comments from Minister Brendan Griffin?
I do, and I will have to say, and I'd like to thank Brendan. He's doing a great job for Kerry and tourism in general in Ireland, and it's very welcome. You know, the packages he has been involved in, he's been heavily involved in the wage subsidy scheme. So it's great to have a minister in or a junior minister, whatever he is. He's a superman in our constituency. But we have challenges, like, you know, and while the VAT rate is a welcome one, you know, one of probably our biggest challenges being faced is the rates issue. It's always been a problem. It's been a problem for 30 years. And then I also understand if Kerry County Council don't get rates, how do they survive? So, you know, maybe we need to go back to government level on rates. I just speak for our hotel alone. We will probably owe 100,000 at the end of this year on rates. And going into next year, it'll be another 100,000. So we'll never catch up to be able to paying that. So if this year is very difficult, but there is positivity, and next year will be positive. But rates, that's one of our biggest things. Working capital for companies. You know, some hotels, some tourists, not just the hotels, every industry. We've loans, we have, you know, we've wage costs, we've everything. So we're trying to get people back, and people is the most important thing in my estimation. It's just my opinion. You know, people whether they're coming on holidays, whether they're an employee, but if a business cannot afford to pay its wages or pay its rates or pay whatever else, it's just going to find it extremely difficult with lack of income this year coming in. I've no doubt next year we will be back and we will be able to pay more. But this year it's crucial. It's just the supports for business, all businesses, but especially in Kerry we have tourism. It is crucial.
Okay, and you'd like that funding that's to come through from the EU, obviously you'd like sight of that as soon as possible, whatever form it will take.
We would do, Jerry, but I suppose if we remember everybody in Ireland, you know, whether you're the universities looking for money, whether you're a disability group that needs money, whether you're an industry, whether you're tourism, we're all looking for money. So, you know, the government have a lot of demands on it at the moment, and sometimes I think maybe tourism just slips a little bit to the back because it's more a luxury item than the others are. But we are a very viable option too. We're there for people's health, as in, you know, mentality, getting out in the wide open spaces. Kerry's ideal for all of this stuff. It has mountains, it has golf courses, it has lakes, it has hotels adapting, it has museums adapting, it has the likes of Muckross House, where the town with the park in it, Killarney's the town with the park in it, Tralee has a park. And the one thing I would like to say, Jerry, is Owen spoke about Portugal doing a safe stage badge. Kerry County Council are actually one step ahead with the Hotel Federation, and they have developed the courses. We've piloted people on it, and they're putting people on it, just a basic course about how to get back to work. Again, they're going to do a badge in it, a certification on different things, and that sends out a positive message to tourists, not just in Ireland, but worldwide. Now, I'm sure everybody else will do it, but we are ahead. So I was glad to hear Owen mentioning Portugal. He can now add Kerry onto his list.
He certainly can. And look, there's a comment in here, and it goes to the final thing we'll address. This is the issue of pricing for the remainder of the season. Pat O'Leary, if you could talk to you about this. A listener says, I booked a week away from my family in August in Tipperary. At the time it would have cost us €750. I cancelled as a result of the pandemic. Just out of curiosity, I checked the prices again for the same place, same date, same number of people. Now €1,350. Can you believe it? I'm sick of rip-off Ireland. I bought a swimming pool for the kids. My local toy shop was charging €10 more than Smith's. We've decided to stay in Kerry for the summer and to do day trips and rediscover our own beautiful kingdom. But if this rip-off Ireland continues, we'll be staying at home. What do you make of that, Pat? It's a difficult thing for business to do, to price in staying alive in August, September.
I think Jerry, that's a very unfortunate case, and I would like to think that would not be the norm. I think it's very clear that we want to encourage local tourism, national tourism, and if the industry behaves like that, obviously we will get the wrong image. I think this is not the main, let's say, mainstream industry is not like that. I think that we want tourists. We have a lot to offer. We're looking at national and tourism in the short term, but also in the longer term, because we have so much to offer. As Bernie had said earlier, particularly in Kerry, we have, yes, the scenery is the primary focus, but associated with scenery, there's activities, and people now need a little bit more than just looking at nice views. They want activities, mountain climbing, walking, cycling. All of these we have in abundance, and I think to develop that, we need the
insurance issues, and that the industry will have to be talked about, because they were closing down those sort of activities last year, so that'll all have to be revamped and relooked at, I think.
If you will remember, one of the issues we raised on our I think 5 or 6 point plan to government from the KTIF was insurance, and the whole looking at insurance per se across the tourist industry. And there are, again, looking overseas, there are very, very good examples of how that is handled internationally in places like New Zealand, which thrives on adventure tourism, have a very interesting model, which I am aware that the Minister is working on, which covers the participants without the business being exposed. And these are the kind of innovative ideas we have to work on going forward to encourage people to get into the outdoors, avail of the fresh air, and get the benefits that we have here in Kerry.
Okay, a final suggestion here from a listener, Mary, who gets in touch with us and says, my family's holidayed in North Kerry for more than 20 years. A lot of them have worked on through the front line and are exhausted. They've searched online, can't get a mobile or a holiday home in the Kerry area, until September. So I would say let the Irish people enjoy their country for the rest of the summer, and from September let them come in from the outside so as to stretch out the tourism season. Eoghan Corry, that was a suggestion made by the Recovery Task Force to extend the season.
Yeah, we have 8 points which have been well publicised. Try to extend the season, try to create something in October as well. The pricing thing is a big issue. It's not just that hotels can set their prices. The European tourism industry is struggling to get back. The aviation industry is struggling to get back. So you can get to Lanzarote for $59.99. They're the sort of prices that the local holiday product is going to be competing against. Yeah. And I don't see a way out of this. I know that the season will be shortened and businesses will be struggling to make back the money they had. I don't see a way out of this without price discounting on the Irish side. And also, in terms of coping, getting through all those roadblocks that have not helped our tourism. I remember gleefully writing about the Greenway to Cahersaveen, at the same time the Waterford Greenway was announced, and it never happened because there were so many planning obstacles and landowner objections, all of those things. And somebody mentioned the whole compo culture that is closing down outdoor activities. These are all things that have been hampering Irish tourism in recent years, and this is our opportunity to take them on and say, we have a huge crisis, we've so many jobs at stake, we need to get these all settled and out of the way. We're not going to wait for a bigger crisis to come around. Yeah, okay, fair point. And listen, I want to thank all of you for talking to us in the programme this morning about that and giving us your view and your ideas and suggestions as to what needs to happen over the next couple of months to get tourism going in this county again. That's Eoghan Corry there of Travel Extra, a member of the Tourism Recovery Task Force, Pat O'Leary, who's chair of the Irish Tourism, or the Kerry Tourism Industry Federation, and also a member of that task force at a national level, Minister Brendan Griffin of Fine Gael, Minister for State at the Department of Tourism, for now anyway, and hopefully, I suppose, continuing in terms of Kerry representation on the makeup of the new government, if that gets agreed, and Bernadette Randles of the Irish Hotels Federation and Randles Hotel in Killarney, and thanks to you as well for giving us your thoughts.